You know, they say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes I wonder if that old saying has led more people astray than it has guided them home. My name is Judy Campbell, and at 78 years old, I've learned that the people who share your DNA aren't always the ones who truly care about your heart. What I'm about to share with you might sound like something out of a soap opera, but I promise you, every word of this story is as real as the wrinkles on my hands and the ache in my bones when it rains. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. For months now, I've been living with a secret that would shock my children to their core. You see, they think they know everything about their old mother. They think I'm just another aging widow, slowly losing her grip on reality, struggling to make ends meet on a fixed income. They couldn't be more wrong. But I've let them believe their version of the truth because sometimes the most revealing light comes from the shadows we think no one can see. This story begins with what my children called a safety measure, and what I discovered was actually a window into their souls. It's a tale of deception, but not the kind you might expect. The biggest lie wasn't the one being told to me, it was the one I was telling to them. And before this story reaches its conclusion, that lie will either destroy our family or reveal what family truly means. If you think you know how this ends, I promise you, you don't. Because sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one holding all the cards. The October rain drummed against my kitchen window with the persistence of an old friend who refuses to leave. I was standing at my counter, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of Earl Grey, watching the drops race each other down the glass when I heard the key turning in my front door. The sound still made me jump, even though I'd given both my children keys years ago. There's something unsettling about hearing someone enter your home when you're not expecting them, even when you know exactly who it is. "Mom, where are you?" That was Diana's voice, sharp and efficient as always. My daughter had inherited her father's no-nonsense approach to life, but somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten to inherit his warmth. "In the kitchen, sweetheart," I called back, setting down my cup and smoothing my cardigan. At 78, I still felt the need to present myself properly, even for my own children. Old habits, I suppose. Diana appeared in the doorway, her auburn hair pulled back in that severe bun she favored for work, her gray suit impeccable despite the weather. Behind her came Marcus, my eldest, shaking raindrops from his expensive coat. Where Diana was all sharp angles and efficiency, Marcus had grown soft around the middle, his once handsome face now bearing the marks of too many business lunches and too much stress. "Mom, we need to talk," Diana said, not bothering with pleasantries. She never did anymore. "Of course, darling. Let me make you both some tea," I offered, moving toward the kettle. "No, Mom, just sit down, please." Marcus's voice carried that patient tone people use with children and the elderly, the one that makes your skin crawl because it's trying so hard to sound kind while being anything but. I settled into my usual chair at the kitchen table, the one that gave me the best view of my garden through the bay window. Even in October, there were still a few stubborn roses clinging to life out there. Hardy things, roses. They survive longer than you'd expect if you know how to tend them properly. Diana pulled out the chair across from me with more force than necessary. "Mom, we're worried about you." Here we go, I thought. I'd been expecting this conversation for weeks, ever since what they were now calling the incident. 3 weeks ago, I'd been watering my plants on the back porch when the hose caught on the railing. I'd stumbled, barely catching myself on the doorframe, but Mrs. Henderson next door had seen it happen and, bless her heart, had called Diana immediately. "I'm fine, sweetheart. It was just a little stumble. Happens to everyone." "Mom," Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on my table. "You're 78 years old. You live alone in this big house. What if you'd really fallen? What if you'd hit your head? You could have been lying there for hours before anyone found you." But I didn't fall, and I wasn't lying anywhere. I caught myself quite well, thank you very much. Diana's jaw tightened, a sure sign she was losing patience. That's not the point, Mom. The point is that you're getting older, and we need to take precautions. Precautions, such a clinical word. I wondered what my late husband, Robert, would have thought about our children using such language about their mother. Robert had always said that growing old was a privilege denied to many, not a disease to be managed. What kind of precautions? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Marcus and Diana exchanged a look, one of those silent communications that siblings develop over decades. Diana nodded slightly, giving Marcus permission to continue. We think you should consider moving, Marcus said gently. There are some lovely assisted living facilities in town, places where you'd have people around, activities, medical care right there if you need it. My heart sank, though I tried not to let it show on my face. This was exactly what I'd feared. I'm not ready for that, Marcus. This is my home. Your father and I built our life here. Dad's been gone for 5 years, Mom, Diana said, and her voice was softer now, though still firm. Holding on to this house isn't going to bring him back. 5 years, 2 months, and 16 days, I thought. But I didn't correct her. Robert's absence was still a physical ache in my chest, but she was right about one thing. This house wouldn't bring him back. Nothing would. But it still held his presence in every creaking floorboard and sun-faded photograph. I understand your concerns, I said carefully, but I'm not ready to leave my home. I'm still perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Mom, be reasonable. Diana's impatience was showing again. You're not getting any younger, and neither are we. We can't keep worrying about you every day, wondering if you're okay. I never asked you to worry about me every day. Well, we do, Marcus said, because we love you, and because we're your children, and that's what children do. I wanted to ask him when he'd last visited just to spend time with me, not because he needed something or was checking up on me. I wanted to ask Diana when she'd last called just to chat, not to lecture me about my finances or my health. But I kept those questions to myself. At my age, you learn to pick your battles carefully. So, what are you proposing? I asked instead. Diana reached into her purse and pulled out a small white device, about the size of a deck of cards. We want to install a monitoring system, just for our peace of mind. A monitoring system? I repeated, though I knew exactly what she meant. It's a baby monitor, Marcus explained, as if I were too old to understand modern technology. We can put the receiver in your bedroom, and we'll each have a unit at our houses. That way, if something happens, if you need help, we'll know immediately. I stared at the device in Diana's hands. Such a small thing to represent such a large violation of privacy. You want to listen to me in my own bedroom? Only for emergencies, Mom, Diana said quickly. We're not going to be listening all the time. It's just there as a safety net. A safety net, that's what they were calling it. But it sounded more like a trap to me. What if I don't want it? I asked. Another look passed between them. Mom, Marcus said slowly, if you won't consider assisted living, then this is the compromise. We need to know you're safe. The unspoken threat hung in the air between us. Accept the monitor, or we'll find other ways to ensure your safety, ways that might not give you as much choice. I looked at my children, really looked at them. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When had they become these people? When had love turned into control and concern into manipulation? Diana was 42, a successful real estate agent with her own firm. Marcus was 45, a mid-level manager at an insurance company. Both of them had their own families, their own problems, their own lives. When had managing their elderly mother become such a burden? But perhaps I was being unfair. Perhaps they really were just concerned. Perhaps I was the one being stubborn and unreasonable. After all, what did I have to hide? What could they possibly hear that would matter? If only they knew. "All right," I said finally. "If it will make you feel better, you can install your monitor." The relief on their faces was immediate and visible. Diana actually smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. "Thank you, Mom," Marcus said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "You won't even know it's there." But I would know. I would know that my private moments were no longer private, that my conversations were no longer my own, that in the name of safety, I had surrendered something precious and irreplaceable. Diana was already reading the instructions on the back of the box. "Marcus can set it up right now. It only takes a few minutes." "Now?" I asked. "Don't you think we should discuss the details first? When you'll be listening, how it works, what you'll do if you hear something concerning." "It's very simple, Mom," Marcus said, already standing up. "The receiver goes in your bedroom, probably on your nightstand. We'll each have a monitor at home, and we can hear if you call for help or if there's any kind of emergency." "But how will you know if I'm calling for help versus just talking to myself or watching television?" Diana waved dismissively. "We'll be able to tell. And if we're not sure, we'll call you first before rushing over." I wanted to ask more questions, wanted to establish boundaries and rules, but they were already moving. Diana unpacking the monitor, while Marcus headed toward my bedroom. It seemed the decision was being implemented whether I was ready or not. I followed them down the hallway, my steps slow and careful on the hardwood floors that Robert had installed himself 40 years ago. My bedroom was at the back of the house, overlooking the garden that had been my pride and joy since we'd moved here. It was a large room, with windows on 2 walls and built-in bookshelves that Robert had made for me one anniversary. The bed was too big for just me now, but I couldn't bring myself to replace it with something smaller. Marcus was already examining my nightstand, looking for the best place to position the receiver. "This should work perfectly," he said, moving aside my reading lamp and the small framed photograph of Robert and me on our wedding day. "Careful with that," I said quickly, steadying the frame as he shifted it. "Sorry, Mom. I'll be careful." Diana was reading the manual aloud. "The range is up to 300 feet, so we should have no problem hearing you from anywhere in the house. The battery life is excellent, and it has a low battery indicator. Oh, and it has a nightlight feature in case you need to get up in the dark." "How thoughtful," I murmured, watching Marcus plug the receiver into the outlet beside my bed. "There we go," he said, stepping back to admire his work. "See, you can barely notice it's there." But I could notice it. It seemed to loom on my nightstand like a small white monument to my lost independence. The little green light on the front blinked steadily, indicating it was working, listening, waiting. "Now, let's test it," Diana said, pulling out what must be her unit from her purse. "Say something, Mom." I looked at the receiver, then at my children's expectant faces. "What would you like me to say?" "Anything, just so we can make sure. It's working properly." "Hello?" I said toward the device, feeling foolish. Diana's monitor crackled to life, my voice coming through clearly. "Perfect. The sound quality is excellent." "And if you need help," Marcus explained, "you just call out loudly, and whoever's monitoring will hear you right away." "Who decides who's monitoring when?" I asked. "We'll work out a schedule," Diana said. "Probably take turns or maybe one of us during the day and one at night. We'll figure it out." They were discussing my surveillance as casually as they might discuss carpooling arrangements for their own children. I wondered if they realized how that made me feel, but looking at their faces, I didn't think they did. "Is there anything else you need to know about how it works?" Marcus asked. I shook my head. What else was there to know? They could now listen to every word I spoke in the privacy of my own bedroom. They would hear my phone conversations, my prayers, my moments of grief when I missed Robert so much I could barely breathe. They would hear me talking to his photograph, something I did more often than I cared to admit. "All right then," Diana said, gathering up the packaging. "We should get going. Michael's got a soccer game at 4. My grandson's soccer game, something else I'd been excluded from, though they'd stopped inviting me to family events months ago. Too much trouble to accommodate the elderly woman, I supposed. They both hugged me goodbye, quick, perfunctory embraces that felt more like obligation than affection. Diana's hug lasted exactly 3 seconds. I counted. Marcus held on a moment longer, and for just an instant, I caught a glimpse of the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared. "We love you, Mom," he said. "This is going to give us all peace of mind." "I know, sweetheart. I love you too." After they left, I stood in my bedroom doorway, looking at the monitor on my nightstand. The green light continued its steady blinking, like a mechanical heartbeat. I walked over and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the device. "Well, Robert," I said to his photograph, "what do you think of this development?" Of course, he didn't answer. He'd been gone for 5 years, 2 months, and 16 days. But if he had answered, I think he would have been troubled by what our children had become. Robert had always believed in treating people with dignity, regardless of their age or circumstances. He would have found a way to address their concerns, without making me feel like a prisoner in my own home. I picked up the monitor and examined it more closely. It was surprisingly sophisticated for such a small device. According to the label, it had a range of 300 feet and could operate on either battery or electrical power. There was a volume control, a channel selector, and several other buttons whose functions weren't immediately obvious. Setting it back down, I realized that my life had just changed in a fundamental way. From this moment forward, I would need to be conscious of every word I spoke, every sound I made, every private moment I thought I was having alone. My children would be listening, judging, evaluating my mental state and physical condition based on whatever fragments of my life they happened to overhear. But as I sat there, an interesting thought began to form in my mind. If they were going to listen to me, if they were going to make assumptions about my life based on what they heard, then perhaps I had an opportunity here. Perhaps I could control what they heard, shape their perceptions, guide their understanding of my situation. After all, they didn't know about the safety deposit box downtown, the one that held documents they'd never seen. They didn't know about my monthly meetings with Harold Pemberton, my financial advisor, or about the portfolio that had grown substantially since Robert's death. They assumed I was living on Social Security and Robert's modest pension, struggling to make ends meet in this big house. They had no idea that their allegedly impoverished mother was worth more than $8 million. Robert had been far more successful in his business ventures than we'd ever let on. We'd lived modestly, saved carefully, and invested wisely. When he died, he left me very comfortable indeed, but I'd never seen any reason to broadcast our financial situation. Money changes how people treat you, and not always for the better. But now, as I looked at that blinking green light, I realized I might have a use for my secret. If my children were going to monitor me, if they were going to make decisions about my life based on what they thought they knew, then perhaps they should hear exactly what I wanted them to hear. I walked over to my dresser and opened the top drawer, pushing aside silk scarves and costume jewelry until I found what I was looking for. A small leather address book that Robert had given me years ago. I flipped through the pages until I found Harold Pemberton's number. Sitting back down, on the bed, I picked up my bedside phone and dialed. Harold answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Judy, how lovely to hear from you. How are you doing?" "I'm well, Harold. Thank you. Listen, I need to ask you something rather unusual." I glanced at the monitor, making sure I was speaking clearly enough to be heard. I'm concerned about my financial situation. The expenses of maintaining this house are becoming quite burdensome. There was a pause. Harold had been managing my finances for 3 years now, since Robert's original advisor had retired. He knew exactly how secure my financial position was. I'm sorry, Judy. I'm not sure I understand. Your portfolio is performing extremely well, and your income far exceeds your expenses. Are you having some kind of unexpected costs? No. Unexpected costs. I'm just worried about the future, you understand. At my age, I need to be more careful with money. Another pause. Judy, is everything all right? You sound different. I looked directly at the monitor as I answered. I'm fine, Harold. I just think I need to be more conservative with my investments. Perhaps we should consider liquidating some assets, moving everything into safer, lower-yield options. Judy, that would be a significant mistake. Your current allocation is appropriate for your age and risk tolerance, and you're earning excellent returns. If you move everything to conservative investments now, you'll lose substantial income. I understand, but I think it's the prudent thing to do. A woman my age can't afford to take risks. We talked for a few more minutes with Harold trying to understand my sudden change in attitude and me speaking carefully for my audience of 2. When I finally hung up, I felt both guilty for misleading Harold and satisfied that I'd planted the first seed. If Diana and Marcus were listening, they now knew that their mother was worried about money, concerned about her ability to maintain her lifestyle, and considering making financial decisions that would reduce her income significantly. Let them chew on that for a while. I spent the rest of the afternoon moving through my house, conscious of the monitor's presence but trying to act normally. I made myself a simple dinner of soup and toast, watched the evening news, and did some light reading. All perfectly ordinary, activities for a woman my age. But as bedtime approached, I found myself growing increasingly uncomfortable with the idea of sleeping with that device on my nightstand. Would they really listen to me sleep? Would they hear me if I cried out from a nightmare about Robert, something that still happened more often than I cared to admit? I changed into my nightgown and brushed my teeth, acutely aware that my children might be listening to these most private moments. As I climbed into bed, I looked at the monitor one more time. "Good night, Robert," I said to his photograph, as I did every night. "Sweet dreams, my love." Then I turned off the light and lay in the darkness, listening to the silence of my house and wondering what tomorrow would bring. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint sound of traffic on the main road. But inside my bedroom, there was only the soft sound of my breathing and the nearly inaudible hum of the monitor, faithfully transmitting every sound to my children, who thought they were protecting me but had no idea what they'd really done. They'd given me a weapon I never knew I needed. As I drifted off to sleep, I was already planning my next performance. The morning sun filtered through my lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the hardwood floor of my bedroom. I'd been awake for nearly an hour, lying still and listening to the familiar sounds of my house settling into another day. The furnace hummed softly in the basement, the old pipes creaked as they expanded with the morning warmth, and somewhere in the walls, I could hear the scurrying of what was probably a field mouse who'd found his way inside for the winter. All perfectly normal sounds, except now they were being broadcast to whoever happened to be monitoring the little white device on my nightstand. I rolled over and looked at the clock. 7:15. Diana would be getting her kids ready for school, right about now, and Marcus would be shaving and preparing for another day at the insurance office. Were either of them listening to me breathe? Had they heard me tossing and turning during the night when sleep wouldn't come? The green light on the monitor blinked steadily, patient and persistent as a heartbeat. I wondered if it had some kind of activation feature, if it only transmitted when it detected sound above a certain level, or if it was constantly broadcasting every tiny noise from my room. The instruction manual was probably still in Diana's purse, along with all the details about how this invasion of my privacy actually worked. I sat up slowly, making a conscious effort not to groan as my joints protested the movement. At 78, getting out of bed was an orchestrated effort, involving careful positioning and strategic momentum. But I wasn't about to let my children hear me struggling with something as simple as standing up. "Another beautiful morning, Robert," I said to his photograph, keeping my voice steady and clear. "I think I'll make pancakes today. Remember how you used to say my pancakes were better than your mother's? She never forgave me for that." I smiled at the memory, genuine warmth flooding through me. Robert's mother had been a formidable woman who took great pride in her cooking, and the day Robert declared my pancakes superior had been both a triumph and the beginning of a very chilly relationship with my mother-in-law. Moving toward my dresser, I selected a navy blue dress with small white flowers, one that Robert had always said brought out my eyes. As I changed from my nightgown, I found myself turning away from the monitor, an automatic response to preserve some shred of modesty even though I knew it couldn't see me. The bathroom was just across the hall, thankfully outside the range of the bedroom monitor. For a few precious minutes, I could brush my teeth and wash my face without an electronic audience. But even there, I found myself hurrying through my morning routine, anxious to return to my performance. Back in the bedroom, I sat at my vanity and began brushing my hair. It was still thick, though completely silver now, and I wore it in a soft style that framed my face. Robert used to brush it for me sometimes, long, slow strokes that were both intimate and soothing. I missed those quiet moments more than almost anything else. "I should probably call Sarah today," I said aloud, speaking to the monitor as if it were a confidant. "She mentioned that her property taxes went up again this year. Seems like everything's getting more expensive." Sarah was my neighbor 2 houses down, a widow about my age who'd become a good friend over the years. We often talked about the rising costs of maintaining our homes, though neither of us was in any real financial difficulty. But my children didn't need to know that. I made my way to the kitchen, conscious of each step on the hardwood floors. The house was large by today's standards, built in 1962 when families expected space to spread out and builders didn't scrimp on materials. The kitchen had been updated twice over the years, most recently about 10 years ago, when Robert and I had splurged on granite countertops and new appliances. As I measured flour and eggs for pancakes, I continued my carefully crafted monologue. "I really should look into refinancing the house," I mused, cracking eggs into a bowl. "The mortgage payment is getting harder to manage every month. Maybe I should talk to that nice young man at the bank, see what options I have." Of course, I'd paid off the mortgage 15 years ago, but Diana and Marcus didn't know that. They assumed I was still making payments, still struggling with the financial burden of maintaining the family home. Let them continue to think so. The pancakes sizzled in the pan, filling the kitchen with the rich scent of butter and vanilla. I'd made thousands of pancakes in this kitchen over the years, for sleepy children on Saturday mornings, for Robert, when he was recovering from his heart surgery, for grandchildren during their occasional visits. Now, I was making them for an audience I couldn't see, children who thought they were protecting me but were actually learning more about me than they realized. My phone rang just as I was flipping the last pancake. The caller ID showed Harold, Pemberton's office number, and I felt a moment of panic. Had I confused him too much yesterday? Was he calling to check on my mental state? "Hello, Harold," I answered, making sure my voice carried clearly to the monitor. "Good morning, Judy. I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday. I've been thinking about your concerns, and I'd like to suggest we meet this week to review your portfolio in detail." "Oh, Harold, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not sure that's necessary. I've been doing some research on my own, and I think I understand what needs to be done." There was a pause. "Research? Judy, what kind of research?" I've been reading about conservative investment strategies. For seniors, there are some articles online about the importance of capital preservation over growth when you reach a certain age. I think I've been too aggressive with my investments. Judy, your investments aren't aggressive at all. They're actually quite conservative for someone in your position, and your income needs haven't changed since we last met. What's brought this on? I looked directly at the monitor, ensuring my next words were clearly audible. Harold, I'm 78 years old. I can't afford to lose money in the stock market. I need to know that I'll have enough to pay my bills, to keep this house, to maintain some dignity in my old age. But Judy, you have more than enough. I have to go, Harold. My breakfast is getting cold. We'll talk soon. I hung up before he could finish his sentence, leaving him puzzled and probably concerned about my sudden change in perspective. But I'd accomplished what I needed to. Anyone listening would now believe that their mother was genuinely worried about her financial security, so concerned that she was considering making potentially harmful changes to her investment strategy. As I ate my pancakes, I thought about the conversation I'd overheard 3 months ago, the one that had started me thinking about my children's true motivations. I'd been in the garden, weeding around the roses, when Marcus and Diana had arrived for what they thought would be a quick visit. They'd talked on the front porch, not knowing that sound carried clearly around the corner to where I was working. "She's getting more forgetful," Diana had said. "Last week she couldn't remember if she'd paid the electric bill." "That's not good," Marcus had replied. "How are her finances? Is she managing okay?" "I don't think so. She mentioned something about the mortgage payment being a strain, and you've seen how she's been dressing lately. Those same old clothes over and over. Maybe we should offer to help with some bills." "Marcus, we can't afford to support Mom indefinitely. We have our own families to think about. College funds, retirement savings. We need to figure out what she has, what she can afford, and what the realistic options are." "You mean like selling the house?" "Maybe. Or moving her somewhere more affordable. But first, we need to understand her financial situation better." That conversation had revealed more about my children than they'd intended. They weren't genuinely concerned about my welfare. They were worried about their own financial obligations. They wanted to know what I had, so they could plan accordingly, make decisions about my future that would minimize any burden on them. That's when I'd started being more careful about what information I shared, more strategic about the image I presented. If they thought I was struggling financially, they'd be less likely to ask me for help with their own expenses. And if the time came when I needed to make difficult decisions about my estate, I'd have a clearer picture of their true character. The phone rang again, interrupting my thoughts. This time it was my neighbor Sarah, her cheerful voice bright, even through the electronic receiver. "Judy, dear, how are you this morning? I hope you slept well." "Oh, hello, Sarah. Yes, I slept reasonably well, thank you. How are you doing?" "I'm fine, though I had quite a scare yesterday. I was going through my bills, and my heating oil delivery cost nearly twice what it did last year." "Twice! Can you believe it?" This was perfect. I settled back in my chair, making sure my voice would carry clearly to the bedroom monitor. "Oh my goodness, Sarah, that's terrible. I've been worried about the same thing. My electric bill last month was almost $200, and that was with keeping the thermostat at 68. I don't know how I'm going to manage when it really gets cold." It's frightening, isn't it? At our age, on fixed incomes, these increases are devastating. I've been thinking about applying for that energy assistance program through the county. Have you looked into that? Energy assistance? I made my voice sound uncertain, vulnerable. I didn't know there was such a thing. "Oh, yes, dear. It's for seniors who are having trouble paying their heating bills. There's no shame in it. Judy, we worked hard all our lives, paid our taxes, raised our families. If there's help available, we deserve it." We talked for another 15 minutes about the rising costs of everything from groceries to prescription medications. Sarah genuinely was concerned about these expenses, though like me, she wasn't in any real financial danger. But our conversation painted a picture of two elderly women struggling to make ends meet, worried about their ability to maintain their independence. After I hung up, I continued my morning routine, all while maintaining my narrative of financial concern. I sorted through mail at the kitchen table, sighing audibly over what appeared to be bills. I made notes on a grocery list, muttering about having to choose between name brands and generics. I even called the electric company to ask about budget, billing options, speaking loudly enough to ensure the monitor caught every word. "Yes, I'd like to know about spreading my payments out over the year," I told the customer service representative. "The winter bills are getting difficult to manage all at once." By mid-morning, I'd established a clear pattern. Anyone listening would believe they were hearing an elderly woman genuinely struggling with the costs of maintaining her home and lifestyle. The picture I was painting was subtle but consistent. A widow on a fixed income, worried about money, considering difficult choices about her future. Around 10:30, I decided to venture upstairs to what had been Robert's study. I'd avoided this room for months after his death, unable to bear the sight of his books and papers, his reading glasses still folded on the desk where he'd left them. But eventually, I'd had to face the task of sorting through his belongings, and in doing so, I'd discovered just how successful his business ventures had really been. Robert had been in commercial real estate development, specializing in small shopping centers and office buildings. He'd been conservative in his approach, never overextending, always maintaining substantial cash reserves. What I hadn't realized during our marriage was just how substantial those reserves had become. The filing cabinet in his study contained the records of properties I'd barely known he owned, investment accounts I'd never heard him mention, business partnerships that had continued to generate income long after he'd stepped back from active involvement. When Harold Pemberton had first explained the full scope of my inheritance, I'd been stunned into silence. "You're a very wealthy woman, Mrs. Campbell," he'd said gently. "Your husband was an extremely astute businessman. Even with estate taxes and settlement costs, you're looking at a net worth of approximately $8.2 million. $8.2 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. More than enough to leave substantial inheritances to my children and grandchildren, but also enough to change how people saw me, how they treated me, what they expected from me." I'd decided that morning to keep the information private, at least initially. I wanted time to understand what this wealth meant, what responsibilities it carried, how it might affect my relationships with family and friends. Robert had kept our financial situation private during his lifetime, and I saw no reason to change that approach immediately after his death. Now, sitting in his study with the knowledge that my children were monitoring my conversations, I was glad I'd made that choice. Their behavior over the past few months had shown me that they were primarily concerned with their own financial security, not with my well-being. If they'd known about my wealth, would they have been more attentive, more caring? Or would they have simply started calculating their expected inheritance? I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out a folder labeled Monthly Statements. Inside were the reports Harold sent me each month, detailing the performance of my investment portfolio. The most recent statement showed a balance of over $8.5 million, up from the $8.2 million I'd inherited. Even in the conservative investments Harold had recommended, the money was growing. But looking at these numbers, I had an idea for my next performance. I picked up the phone on Robert's desk and dialed Harold's direct line. "Harold, it's Judy again. I'm sorry I cut you off earlier, but I've been thinking more about what we discussed. Judy, I'm glad you called back. I'm genuinely concerned about this sudden change in your investment philosophy. Can you help me understand what's brought this on?" "It's just reality, Harold. I'm not getting any younger, and I can't afford to take risks with money I might need for health care, for home maintenance, for emergencies. I've been looking at my expenses, and they're higher than I thought." "What expenses are you concerned about specifically?" I looked around Robert's study, at the solid furniture and expensive artwork that my children had never paid much attention to. Everything, Harold. The house is expensive to maintain. The property? Taxes alone are over $4,000 a year. The heating bills, the insurance, the repairs that seem to come up constantly. I'm starting to wonder if I can afford to stay here much longer. Judy, based on your current income from the portfolio, your annual expenses represent less than 3% of your available funds. You could double your spending and still be in excellent financial shape. But what if something happens? What if I need long-term care? What if the investments lose value? I can't take those chances. Harold, there was a long pause. Judy, are you feeling all right? Is there something else going on that I should know about? I'm fine, Harold. I'm just being realistic about my situation. I think we should schedule a meeting to discuss moving everything into CDs or government bonds, something safe and predictable. That would be a significant mistake, Judy. You'd be giving up substantial income for no good reason. Your current allocation is already quite conservative. I understand your position, Harold, but this is my decision to make. I'm the one who has to live with the consequences. We talked for a few more minutes, with Harold growing increasingly frustrated and me remaining firmly committed to my supposed change of heart. When I finally hung up, I knew he was probably considering whether he should contact someone about my mental state. But I also knew that anyone listening to the conversation would believe they'd heard an elderly woman making prudent, if overly cautious, financial decisions. The rest of the morning passed quietly. I did some light housework, always conscious of the monitor's presence when I was in the bedroom. I changed the sheets, dusted the furniture, and organized my jewelry box, all while maintaining a running commentary about the expenses and challenges of maintaining a home at my age. I really should have Robert's clothes cleaned out of this closet, I said aloud, looking at the suits and shirts I hadn't been able to give away, but I can't afford to just donate them. Maybe I can find someone who buys used clothing. Every little bit helps these days. Of course, I had no intention of selling Robert's clothes. They were staying exactly where they were, for reasons that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the comfort I found in occasionally touching the fabric of a shirt he'd worn, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne that still lingered in the closet. Around noon, Marcus called. I was dusting the living room when the phone rang, and I made sure to answer loudly enough for the bedroom monitor to pick up my side of the conversation. Hi, sweetheart. How are you today? I'm fine, Mom. Just wanted to check in, see how you're doing with the monitor. Any problems with it? No problems at all. It's working perfectly. Too perfectly, I thought, but I kept that to myself. Good. Diana and I were talking this morning, and we're both feeling much better knowing we can here if you need help. That's wonderful, dear. I appreciate you both caring so much. Mom, can I ask you something? Diana thought she heard you on the phone earlier, talking about financial concerns. Is everything okay? So they were listening. I'd suspected as much, but now I had confirmation. Oh, that was just my neighbor Sarah. She's having trouble with her heating bills. You know how we older folks worry about money. But what about you? Are you having any financial difficulties? I paused, as if considering whether to burden my son with my concerns. Well, Marcus, I don't want to worry you, but things are getting tighter. The house is expensive to maintain, and on a fixed income, every increase in costs is challenging. Mom, why didn't you tell us? We could help. Oh, sweetheart, you have your own family to support. I wouldn't dream of asking you and Diana for money. I'm managing fine, but I do have to be more careful these days. What kind of careful? Just watching expenses, being more conscious of what I spend. I've been thinking about some of the financial decisions your father made, wondering if I should be more conservative with investments and such. That sounds reasonable. Dad was always pretty aggressive with money stuff. Robert had actually been quite conservative, but Marcus had never paid attention to our financial decisions. He'd always assumed that other people were more reckless with money than they should be, probably because he'd made some poor investment choices himself over the years. I might need to make some changes, I continued. Maybe sell some investments. Put the money somewhere safer. That makes sense, Mom. You can't afford to lose money at your age. We talked for a few more minutes about mundane things, but I could tell that Marcus was distracted, probably thinking about what I'd told him about my financial situation. When we hung up, I was satisfied that I'd reinforced the image I wanted to project. A woman concerned about money, making prudent but potentially costly decisions to preserve her financial security. The afternoon brought a visit from my friend Eleanor, a sprightly 75-year-old who'd been widowed about the same time I had. Eleanor had never been particularly good with money, and her husband had left her with just enough to get by if she was careful. Unlike me, her financial concerns were genuine. "Judy, I'm so glad I caught you at home," she said as I welcomed her into the living room. "I need some advice about something." "Of course, dear. What's troubling you?" "It's my car. The transmission is going, and the mechanic says it'll cost $2,500 to fix. I don't have that kind of money, but I need the car to get to my doctor appointments, to the grocery store. I don't know what to do." We sat on my sofa, Eleanor's hands twisting nervously in her lap. She was genuinely distressed, and my heart went out to her. But I was also aware that our conversation was being broadcast to my children, providing perfect cover for my own supposed financial struggles. $2,500, I repeated, making sure my voice carried the right tone of concern. "That's such a difficult position to be in. Have you considered getting a second opinion?" I did. The other mechanic said the same thing, and honestly, Judy, even if I could afford the repair, the car is 12 years old. How do I know something else won't break next month? What are your options? I could try to get a loan, but at my age, with my income, I don't think any bank would approve me. I could look for a used car, but anything decent costs more than I have. I'm starting to think I might have to give up driving altogether. Oh, Eleanor, that would be terrible. You'd lose so much independence. We talked about her situation for over an hour, exploring various possibilities and discussing the challenges of maintaining transportation on a limited income. Throughout our conversation, I made sure to express empathy not just for Eleanor's situation, but for the broader struggles that we seniors faced with unexpected expenses. "It's frightening, isn't it?" I said at one point. "We think we're prepared. We think we have enough saved, and then something like this happens. At our age, we can't just go out and earn more money to cover emergencies." "Exactly. And it seems like everything is more expensive than it used to be. Sometimes I wonder how much longer I can afford to stay in my house." "I've been having the same thoughts," I admitted, speaking as much to the monitor as to Eleanor. "The expenses just keep going up, but our incomes stay the same. Something has to give eventually." After Eleanor left, I spent some time thinking about the contrast between her situation and mine. She was genuinely struggling, making difficult choices about how to spend her limited resources. I, on the other hand, had more money than I could spend in several lifetimes, yet I was pretending to face the same challenges she actually lived with every day. Was I being dishonest? Manipulative? Perhaps. But my children had chosen to monitor me without my real consent, to make decisions about my life based on their assumptions about my capabilities and resources. If they wanted to play games with surveillance and control, I could play games with information and perception. As evening approached, I prepared a simple dinner of soup and salad, continuing my narrative of careful economizing. "I really should start buying more generic brands," I mused aloud while heating the soup. "The name brand stuff is just too expensive these days." After dinner, I settled into my favorite chair in the living room with a cup of tea and the evening newspaper. The living room was far enough from the bedroom that the monitor probably couldn't pick up my voice clearly, so I allowed myself a few minutes of genuine peace and quiet. But as bedtime approached, I knew I'd have to return to my performance. I made my way back to the bedroom, brushing my teeth and changing into my nightgown while being conscious of every sound I made. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I picked up Robert's photograph and held it gently in my hands. "It's been quite a day, my love," I said softly. "I think you'd be proud of how I'm handling our children. You always said I was stronger than I realized." I set the photograph back on the nightstand and looked at the monitor with its steadily blinking green light. Tomorrow I would continue my performance, continue shaping my children's understanding of my situation. But tonight, I would try to sleep, despite knowing that even my dreams might be monitored by people who thought they were protecting me, but were actually learning just how little they really knew about their mother. As I turned off the light and settled under the covers, I wondered what Marcus and Diana were thinking about the conversations they'd overheard today. Were they concerned about my financial situation? Were they planning to have another family meeting to discuss my future? Were they beginning to see their elderly mother as more of a burden than they'd expected? Time would tell. But one thing was certain. The little white device on my nightstand was giving me insights into my children's character that I'd never had before. And what I was learning wasn't particularly flattering to either of them. The third week of November brought an early snowfall that coated my garden in pristine white, transforming the bare branches of my oak tree into something magical. I stood at my bedroom window, watching the flakes drift past the glass while sipping my morning coffee. The monitor's green light blinked steadily on my nightstand, and I'd grown so accustomed to its presence that I sometimes forgot it was there. Almost. "Look at that snow, Robert," I said to his photograph. "Remember that blizzard we had in '78? We were snowed in for 3 days, just the two of us. Those were some of the happiest days of my life." The memory was bittersweet, like most memories of Robert these days, but it served my purpose too. Anyone listening would hear a lonely widow talking to her deceased husband's picture, the kind of behavior that might suggest declining mental faculties to those looking for signs of such things. My phone rang, interrupting my reverie. The caller ID showed my doctor's office, and I felt a moment of genuine concern before remembering that this was just a routine appointment reminder. "Mrs. Campbell, this is Jennifer from Dr. Morrison's office. I'm calling to confirm your appointment tomorrow at 2 o'clock. "Yes, I'll be there. Though I have to say, these medical bills are getting quite overwhelming." I made sure my voice carried the right note of worry. "The copays alone are straining my budget." "I understand, Mrs. Campbell. Many of our patients are struggling with healthcare costs. Have you spoken with our billing department about payment plans?" "Payment plans?" I let my voice quaver slightly. I never thought I'd need something like that at my age. I always prided myself on paying my bills in full. "There's nothing wrong with needing help, Mrs. Campbell. Healthcare costs have increased significantly, and we want to work with our patients to ensure they get the care they need." After I hung up, I sat on my bed and considered the conversation. Dr. Morrison had been my physician for 15 years, and his staff knew me well. Jennifer's kind offer of a payment plan was genuine, based on what she thought she knew about my financial situation. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now actively deceiving people who were trying to help someone they believed was struggling. But this was war, in its own quiet way. My children had declared it when they decided to monitor me without my genuine consent, when they began making plans for my future based on their assumptions about my capabilities and resources. If they wanted to play games of surveillance and control, I would play games of misdirection and manipulation. I made my way downstairs to find Diana's car in my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see her sitting behind the wheel, talking on her phone. She looked agitated, her free hand gesturing emphatically as she spoke. When she finally came to the door, her expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension around her eyes. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, opening the door, before she could knock. "This is a lovely surprise." Hi, Mom. I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. I was in the neighborhood showing a house. Diana's real estate business had been struggling lately, though she'd never admitted outright. The market had been unpredictable, and I'd overheard enough phone conversations to know that her commission checks were smaller and less frequent than they used to be. Not that she'd ever ask me for help, of course. She was too proud for that, and besides, she assumed I didn't have any money to spare. Of course I don't mind. Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot. That would be nice, thanks. We settled at my kitchen table, and I noticed Diana glancing toward the stairs that led to my bedroom. Was she thinking about the monitor up there, wondering what conversations it might have captured since her last visit? How's business? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. It's challenging, she admitted. The market is so volatile right now. Buyers are nervous about interest rates. Sellers are unrealistic about pricing. It's difficult to make deals happen. I'm sorry to hear that. I know how hard you work. Diana stirred her coffee absently, and I could see her weighing whether to say something else. Finally, she looked up at me with an expression that might have been concern or calculation. Mom, Marcus and I have been talking about your situation. My situation? Your finances. We're worried about you. I set down my coffee cup carefully, buying myself a moment to consider my response. What about my finances concerns you? We've heard you talking about money troubles, about having to make difficult choices. Mom, why didn't you tell us things were getting tight? So they had been listening. Actively listening, not just monitoring for emergencies. Every conversation I'd had in my bedroom, every phone call about financial concerns, every worried comment about expenses had been transmitted directly to my children. The knowledge should have made me angry, but instead, I felt a cold satisfaction. My performance was working. I didn't want to burden you, dear. You have your own problems to worry about. But Mom, we're your children. We want to help. How could you help? You can barely manage your own expenses. The words came out more sharply than I'd intended, and I saw Diana's face tighten. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I'm just frustrated with my own situation, and I shouldn't take it out on you. Diana leaned forward, her realtor's instincts kicking in. She could sense an opportunity, a problem that might have a solution that would benefit everyone involved. Mom, have you thought about what this house is worth? What do you mean? I mean, this is a large house in a desirable neighborhood. Real estate values have increased significantly since you and Dad bought it. You could probably sell it for 3 times what you paid. Sell the house? I made my voice sound shocked, as if the idea had never occurred to me. Think about it, Mom. You'd have a substantial amount of money from the sale, enough to buy a nice condo or apartment somewhere more manageable. No more yard work, no more maintenance headaches, no more worrying about heating bills for all this space. But this is my home. Robert and I built our life here. I know it's hard to think about, but Dad's been gone for 5 years. Holding on to this house isn't going to bring him back. Her words stung, partly because they were true, and partly because of the casual way she dismissed the importance of my emotional attachment to my home. This house contained 40 years of memories, of holidays and birthdays, of quiet evenings and lazy Sunday mornings. It was where I'd raised my children, where I'd cared for Robert during his final illness, where I still felt his presence in every room. I'm not ready to leave, Diana. But when will you be ready? When you can't afford the property taxes? When something major breaks and you can't pay to fix it? Mom, you need to be practical about this. I am being practical. I'm managing just fine. Are you? Because from what Marcus and I have observed, you seem pretty worried about money lately. Observed. Such a clinical word for eavesdropping on my private conversations. I wondered if Diana even realized how revealing her choice of words was. I'm concerned about the future, yes, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to abandon my home. No one's talking about abandoning anything. We're talking about making a smart financial decision while you still have choices. And what if I don't? Want to make that decision right now? Diana's patience was clearly wearing thin. Mom, you can't just ignore reality because it's inconvenient. If you're having trouble with expenses now, what's going to happen in 5 years? 10 years? You're not getting any younger. Thank you for reminding me. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be helpful. Marcus and I both think you should at least get an appraisal, see what the house is worth. Then you can make an informed decision. And I suppose you'd be happy to handle the listing if I decided to sell? The question hung in the air between us, and I saw a flush creep up Diana's neck. She hadn't expected me to be so direct about the potential conflict of interest. That's not what this is about, Mom. Isn't it? You're struggling with your business. I'm supposedly struggling with my expenses. Selling my house would solve both our problems, wouldn't it? Mom, that's not fair. Isn't it? Diana, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. I can see what's happening here. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I was trying to help you. I was trying to be a good daughter. But if you want to be stubborn and end up losing everything, that's your choice. Everything? What everything am I going to lose? Your independence, Mom. Your ability to choose what happens to you. If you wait until you're in crisis, other people will make those choices for you. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. If I didn't cooperate with their vision of my future, they would find ways to force my cooperation. The monitoring system was just the beginning. After Diana left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, thinking about our conversation. She'd revealed more than she'd probably intended about her true motivations and about the extent of their surveillance. They weren't just monitoring me for emergencies. They were actively listening to my conversations, analyzing my behavior, making judgments about my mental state and financial condition. But they were making those judgments based on carefully crafted misinformation. Every worried comment about money, every conversation about financial difficulties, every expression of concern about the future had been strategically designed to shape their perception of my situation, and it was working perhaps too well. I needed to escalate my performance. That afternoon, I called my bank and asked to speak with someone about refinancing options. The conversation was loud enough to be picked up by the bedroom monitor, and I made sure to emphasize my concerns about making monthly payments on my supposed mortgage. I'm 78 years old, I told the loan officer. I need to know that I can afford my payments on a fixed income. What options do I have for reducing my monthly obligations? Well, Mrs. Campbell, it depends on your current loan terms and the value of your property. When did you purchase your home, and what's your current mortgage balance? We bought the house in 1962, and I believe we still owe about $40,000. The lie came easily, though the truth was that I'd paid off the mortgage completely 15 years ago. $40,000? Mrs. Campbell, with property values in your area, you have substantial equity in your home. You might want to consider a reverse mortgage instead of traditional refinancing. A reverse mortgage? What's that? The loan officer explained the concept, and I asked questions that suggested both interest and concern about the implications. Anyone listening would hear an elderly woman exploring her options for dealing with what appeared to be genuine financial pressure. I'll need to think about this, I said finally. It's a big decision, and I want to make sure I understand all the consequences. Of course. Please feel free to call back if you have more questions. After I hung up, I sat quietly, for a moment considering what I'd just done. The conversation would reinforce my children's belief that I was struggling financially, but it might also prompt them to take more aggressive action. If they thought I was considering a reverse mortgage, they might decide to intervene more directly. That evening, Marcus called. I was reading in the living room when the phone rang, and I made sure to carry it close enough to the bedroom that the monitor would pick up my side of the conversation. Hi, sweetheart. How was your day? It was fine, Mom. Listen, Diana told me about your conversation this morning. She's concerned about you. Is she? She seemed more concerned about getting a real estate listing than about my welfare. Mom, that's not fair. Diana was trying to help. By pressuring me to sell my home? By pointing out some practical realities that you might not have considered. I sighed, letting exhaustion creep into my voice. Marcus, I know you and your sister mean well, but I'm not ready to make any major changes right now. But Mom, if you're having trouble with expenses, maybe you need to consider changes before you're forced into them. What do you mean forced? I mean, if you can't afford the house, if you get behind on payments or taxes, you could lose it anyway. Wouldn't it be better to sell voluntarily and keep the proceeds? I'm not behind on anything, Marcus. Not yet. But Mom, we've heard you talking about money troubles, about having to make difficult financial decisions. We're worried about where this is heading. So they were definitely listening, definitely analyzing every conversation for signs of declining capacity or financial distress. I wondered if they'd discussed my supposed situation between themselves, if they'd made plans for what to do if I became unable to manage my own affairs. I appreciate your concern, dear, but I'm managing fine for now. What about that conversation you had with the bank today? My blood chilled. How did he know about that? The call had been made from my kitchen phone, not from the bedroom. Unless... What conversation? Diana said she heard you talking to someone about refinancing when she was here this morning. Relief flooded. Through me. Diana had been in the house when I made the call, had overheard it naturally rather than through electronic surveillance. But the fact that she'd immediately reported it to Marcus told me everything I needed to know about how closely they were monitoring my activities. I was just exploring my options, Marcus. There's nothing wrong with being informed about financial choices. Of course not. But Mom, if you're thinking about taking on more debt at your age, maybe we should sit down together and look at your whole financial picture. I don't think that's necessary. But what if you're not seeing all the options? What if there are better solutions that you haven't considered? Such as selling the house and investing the proceeds. You could have a steady income without the headaches of property ownership. We've been through this, Marcus. I'm not ready to sell. But Mom, are you ready to lose the house because you couldn't afford to keep it? Another threat, politely. Worded but unmistakable in its implication. Cooperate with our vision of your future, or face the consequences of your stubbornness. I have to go, Marcus. I'll talk to you later. Mom, wait. We're not trying to control your life. We just want what's best for you. I know, sweetheart. Good night. After I hung up, I realized that my performance might be working too well. I'd wanted to convince my children that I was financially vulnerable, but I hadn't anticipated that they would respond by pressuring me to make major life changes immediately. They weren't content to simply monitor my decline. They wanted to manage it actively. The next morning, I decided to add a new element to my performance. I called my neighbor Eleanor, the one with the car troubles, and made sure our conversation would be clearly audible to the bedroom monitor. Eleanor, dear, how are you managing with transportation? Have you found a solution for your car situation? Oh, Judy, it's been so difficult. I finally decided I couldn't afford to fix it, so I sold it to a junk dealer for $200. $200 for a car I paid $15,000 for 12 years ago. What are you doing for transportation? Now? I'm trying to manage with the senior bus service, but it's so limiting. I can only go certain places at certain times, and I have to schedule everything days in advance. Yesterday, I had to cancel a doctor's appointment because I couldn't get transportation. Eleanor, that's terrible. Isn't there anything else you can do? Not really. I've looked into used cars, but anything reliable costs more than I can afford. And even if I could buy something, I'm not sure I could afford the insurance and maintenance. We talked for another 20 minutes about the challenges of maintaining independence without reliable transportation. Eleanor's situation was genuinely difficult, and I felt guilty using her real struggles as props for my performance. But the conversation served my purpose perfectly, reinforcing the image of elderly women facing impossible choices because of financial constraints. "You know, Eleanor," I said as our conversation wound down, "I've been having some financial concerns myself lately. Sometimes I wonder how much longer any of us can afford to maintain our independence. It's frightening, isn't it? We worked hard all our lives, saved what we could, and now it feels like it's not enough. The costs just keep going up, but our incomes stay the same." After we hung up, I sat quietly in my bedroom, looking at the monitor with its steadily blinking light. I wondered if Marcus or Diana was listening at that moment, if they'd heard my conversation with Eleanor, if they were drawing conclusions about my state of mind and my financial situation. The phone rang again, and this time it was Harold Pemberton. His voice sounded strained, and I could tell he was struggling with how to approach whatever he wanted to discuss. "Judy, I've been thinking about our recent conversations, and I'm concerned about the changes you want to make to your portfolio." "What concerns you, Harold?" "Frankly, the decisions you're contemplating don't make financial sense for someone in your position. Moving everything to conservative investments would cost you substantial income for no meaningful benefit. Harold, I understand your position, but I need to prioritize security over growth at this stage of my life." "But Judy, you already have more security than most people could ever dream of. Your current portfolio generates enough income to support a very comfortable lifestyle, with substantial reserves for any emergency that might arise." I looked directly at the monitor, making sure my next words would be clearly audible. "Harold, you're not understanding my situation. The expenses of maintaining my independence are higher than you realize. I need every dollar I can get, and I can't afford to risk losing money in volatile investments." "What expenses are you talking about specifically? Based on our previous discussions, your annual spending is well within your means. Healthcare costs, home maintenance, daily living expenses. Everything is more expensive than it used to be, and I'm on a fixed income." "Judy, you're not on a fixed income in the way most people use that term. Your investment income adjusts with market performance, and even in conservative allocations, you have far more than enough to cover any reasonable expenses." I could hear the frustration in Harold's voice, and I almost felt sorry for him. He was trying to provide good financial advice to someone who appeared to be making irrational decisions based on unfounded fears. "I appreciate your concern, Harold, but I've made up my mind. I want to schedule a meeting to discuss the specifics of moving my investments to more conservative options." "All right, Judy. If you're determined to do this, then we should meet in person so I can make sure you understand all the implications. How about next Wednesday at 10 o'clock? "That would be fine. And Harold, I'd also like to discuss the possibility of liquidating some assets entirely. I may need cash for some upcoming expenses." There was a long pause. "What kind of expenses?" "I'm not sure yet. I just want to be prepared for any contingencies." After I hung up, I realized I'd probably pushed Harold to the point where he might contact someone about my mental state. Financial advisors have responsibilities to their clients, and sudden, irrational changes in investment strategy can be warning signs of cognitive decline or external pressure. But that risk might actually work in my favor. If Harold expressed concerns about my decision-making capacity, it would only reinforce my children's belief that I was struggling to manage my affairs competently. That afternoon, I took a calculated risk. I walked to my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson's house, and asked to borrow her phone, claiming that mine was having problems. Mrs. Henderson was a sweet woman in her 60s who'd always been helpful, and she immediately invited me in and offered me the use of her kitchen phone. I called Diana's office, knowing that the conversation wouldn't be monitored by the bedroom device. Diana Campbell Real Estate. This is Diana. Diana, it's Mom. I'm calling from Mrs. Henderson's house because my phone is acting up. Is everything okay? I think so, but I wanted to ask you something. That conversation we had yesterday about the house, about getting an appraisal. Maybe you were right. Maybe I should at least find out what it's worth. I could hear the excitement in Diana's voice, though she tried to keep it professional. I think that's a very wise decision, Mom. Knowledge is power, and you can't make good choices without good information. When could you do it? I could have someone out there this week if you'd like. It wouldn't commit you to anything, just give you a baseline understanding of your home's value. All right, set it up. Mom, I'm really glad you're being open to this. I know change is hard, but sometimes it's necessary. I'm just trying to be practical, dear. Like you said, I need to face reality. After I hung up, Mrs. Henderson offered me a cup of tea, and we chatted for a few minutes about neighborhood happenings. But my mind was elsewhere, thinking about what I'd just set in motion. An appraisal would reveal that my house was worth far more than Diana expected, probably close to $600,000 in the current market. That information might complicate my performance, but it might also provide new opportunities for misdirection. When I returned home, I made sure to mention my phone troubles loudly enough for the bedroom monitor to pick up. I really need to call the phone company about this line, I said to no one in particular. I can't afford for it to go out completely. At my age, I need reliable communication. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was complaining about communication problems while my children were secretly monitoring my conversations through their electronic device. That evening, I prepared for bed with the same ritual I'd developed over the past few weeks. I spoke to Robert's photograph, sharing the events of the day as if he were still there to listen. It's getting complicated, my love, I said softly. The children are pushing harder now, and I'm not sure how much longer I can maintain this charade. But I need to know who they really are, what they really want. I need to understand if their concern is genuine or if it's something else entirely. I turned off the light and lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of my house settling for the night. Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows and making the bare branches of the oak tree scratch against the roof. But inside my bedroom, there was only the soft sound of my breathing and the nearly inaudible hum of the monitor, faithfully transmitting every sound to my children, who thought they were protecting me, but were actually providing me with the perfect weapon to test their true character. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to shape their understanding of my situation. The appraisal Diana was arranging would add another layer of complexity to my performance, but it might also reveal just how far my children were willing to go to get what they wanted. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered if Robert would approve of what I was doing. He'd always been straightforward in his dealings with people, honest almost to a fault. But he'd also been protective of his family, careful about who he trusted with important information. I thought he'd understand that sometimes the truth is best revealed through carefully constructed lies, and that the people who claim to love you aren't always the ones who have your best interests at heart. The appraiser arrived on a gray December morning, a young man named Kevin who carried himself with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd done this job hundreds of times before. Diana had called the night before to confirm the appointment, her voice bright with barely contained excitement about what we might discover. Mrs. Campbell, I'm Kevin Rodriguez from Metropolitan Property Assessments. Your daughter arranged for me to evaluate your home today. I welcomed him inside, noting how his eyes immediately began cataloging details, taking in the crown molding, the hardwood floors, the built-in bookcases that Robert had crafted with such care. Kevin pulled out a tablet and began making notes, his fingers dancing across the screen with practiced ease. Beautiful home, he said, looking around the entryway. These older houses have so much character. They don't build them like this anymore. Thank you. My husband and I put a lot of love into this place over the years. It shows. Now, I'll need to measure each room and take some photos. The whole process should take about 2 hours. Feel free to go about your normal routine while I work." I nodded and retreated to the kitchen, but I made sure to stay within earshot as Kevin moved through the house. I could hear him dictating notes into his tablet, commenting on architectural features, room dimensions, and the condition of various elements. When he reached my bedroom, I was particularly conscious of the monitor on my nightstand, wondering what he might make of the small white device. "Nice master suite," I heard him say. "Good natural light, decent closet space. Is that some kind of intercom system on the nightstand?" "Oh, that's just a baby monitor," I called back, making my voice sound slightly embarrassed. My children insisted on it for safety reasons. They worry about me living alone. Smart thinking. My grandmother has something similar. Peace of mind for the whole family. As Kevin continued his work, I found myself genuinely curious about what he would determine my house was worth. Diana and Marcus assumed I was struggling financially, but if the appraisal came back with a figure in the high hundreds of thousands, how would they reconcile that with their perception of my money troubles? The answer, I suspected, would reveal a great deal about their true motivations. Kevin spent considerable time in the basement, examining the foundation, the electrical system, and the furnace that Robert had replaced just 5 years before his death. He measured the garage, walked the perimeter of the property, and took dozens of photographs from various angles. When he finally finished, he found me in the living room, ostensibly reading but actually listening to every sound he made. "All done, Mrs. Campbell. I should have the written report ready by tomorrow afternoon. Your daughter asked me to send it directly to her, if that's all right with you." "Of course. What's your initial impression? Are we talking about a substantial value?" Kevin hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with giving preliminary figures. "Well, I don't want to quote anything specific until I've run all the comparables, but I can tell you that properties in this neighborhood have been performing very well. Your home has a lot of desirable features that buyers look for." "Meaning, it's worth more than we originally paid for it?" "Almost certainly, yes. Real estate values in established neighborhoods like this one have appreciated significantly over the past decade." After Kevin left, I sat in my living room thinking about what the appraisal might reveal and how my children would react to the information. If the house was worth as much as I suspected, Diana would see dollar signs and renewed pressure to sell. Marcus would see an asset that could solve my supposed financial problems. Neither of them would stop to consider that I might not want to sell, regardless of the potential profit. That afternoon, Harold Pemberton called with what sounded like a carefully rehearsed speech about my proposed investment changes. "Judy, I've been consulting with some colleagues about your situation, and we're all in agreement that the changes you want to make would be financially disadvantageous." "Financially disadvantageous to whom, Harold? To me or to you and your commission structure?" The accusation was unfair, and I knew it. Harold charged a flat fee for managing my portfolio, not a percentage that would be affected by my investment choices, but I wanted anyone listening to hear me questioning the motives of my financial advisor, suggesting that I was becoming suspicious of the people I'd previously trusted. "Judy, that's not fair, and you know it. My compensation doesn't change. Based on how your money is invested, I'm concerned about you personally." "Concerned about what exactly?" "Concerned that you're making decisions based on fear rather than facts. Your financial position is extremely secure. There's no rational reason for you to move to ultra-conservative investments." I moved closer to the bedroom, ensuring that my voice would carry clearly to the monitor. "Harold, you don't understand the pressures I'm facing. The expenses of aging, the uncertainty about healthcare costs, the possibility that I might need long-term care. I can't afford to take risks with money I might desperately need." "But Judy, even with the most conservative investments, you have far more than enough to cover any reasonable long-term care costs, and your current portfolio is already quite conservative for someone with your net worth." "My net worth? Harold, I think you're overestimating my resources. I'm a widow on a fixed income, not some wealthy dowager. There was a long pause, and I could hear Harold's confusion through the phone line. Judy, we review your portfolio every quarter. You know exactly what your net worth is. I know what the numbers on paper say, but paper profits aren't the same as real money I can spend. Judy, these aren't paper profits. These are actual assets that generate actual income. Income that far exceeds your annual expenses. I could hear the frustration in Harold's voice, but I pressed on with my performance. I want to schedule that meeting we discussed. I need to make some changes, and I need to do it soon. All right, but Judy, I'm going to ask you to bring someone with you to that meeting. Someone? A family member, perhaps. Someone who can help you think through these decisions objectively. My blood chilled. If Harold insisted on involving my children in financial discussions, my entire deception could unravel in a single meeting. But I couldn't refuse without seeming even more unstable. I suppose that would be fine. Though I'm not sure my children would have time for such things. I think they'd make time for something this important. Shall I call them directly, or would you prefer to ask them yourself? I'll ask them. But Harold, I want to be clear that any decisions about my money are mine to make, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Of course, Judy, but sometimes it helps to have other perspectives, especially when the decisions are complex. After I hung up, I realized that Harold's insistence on involving my family was actually a gift. It would give me an opportunity to observe my children's reactions when they learned the true scope of my wealth. Would they be surprised? Pleased? Would they suddenly become more attentive and loving? Or would their behavior reveal motivations I'd only suspected until now? That evening, Marcus called just as I was finishing a modest dinner of scrambled eggs and toast. Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today? I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired. It's been a busy day. Diana told me about the appraiser. That's a smart move, getting a realistic picture of what the house is worth. We'll see what he finds. Though honestly, Marcus, I'm not sure it matters what the house is worth if I can't afford to maintain it. What do you mean? I carried the phone closer to the bedroom, making sure my voice would be clearly audible to the monitor. I had another conversation with my financial advisor today. The situation is more complicated than I thought. Complicated how? He wants me to bring family members to our next meeting. He seems to think I need help making financial decisions. There was a pause, and I could almost hear Marcus's mental wheels turning. What kind of financial decisions? About my investments, about how to manage my money going forward. Harold thinks I'm being too conservative, but I think he doesn't. Understand the realities of my situation. Mom, maybe Harold's right. Maybe it would be good to have someone there to help you sort through the options. Would you be willing to come to the meeting? You understand business and investments better than Diana does. Of course I would. When is it scheduled? Next Wednesday at 10 o'clock, Harold's office downtown. I'll be there. Mom, don't worry about this. We'll figure out what's best for you. The phrase, what's best for you, carried an ominous undertone, as if Marcus had already decided what that might be regardless of my own preferences. But I kept my voice grateful and relieved. Thank you, sweetheart. I appreciate your support. That's what family is for, Mom. The next morning brought the appraisal report, delivered by email to Diana, and forwarded to me with a brief note. Mom, you need to see this. Call me when you've had a chance to read it. I opened the PDF file and felt a moment of genuine surprise at the figure Kevin had calculated. The house was appraised at $647,000, significantly higher than even my optimistic estimates. For a property I'd bought for $32,000 in 1962, it represented an appreciation that would seem miraculous to anyone who didn't understand how real estate values had evolved over 6 decades. But to my children, who assumed I was financially struggling, this appraisal would seem like the answer to all my problems. They would see it as validation of their suggestion that I sell the house and invest the proceeds for income. Diana called, within an hour of sending the email. "Mom, did you see the appraisal?" "Yes, I did. It's quite shocking, actually." "Shocking? Mom, it's wonderful. Do you realize what this means?" "It means my property taxes are going to increase substantially." "Mom, forget about property taxes. This means you have over $600,000 in equity in your house. That's a fortune." I let silence stretch between us, as if I were struggling to comprehend the implications. "I suppose it is a lot of money." "A lot of money?" "Mom, invested properly, that much money could generate $40,000 or $50,000 a year in income. You'd never have to worry about expenses again." "But where would I live?" "You could buy a beautiful condo or apartment for half that amount and still have hundreds of thousands left to invest. You could live comfortably for the rest of your life without ever touching the principal." Diana's excitement was palpable, but I noticed that her calculations assumed I had no other assets to speak of. She was treating the house equity as if it were my only significant financial resource. "It's a lot to think about," I said carefully. "What's to think about?" "Mom, this is the solution to all your financial worries. You could stop stressing about money and start enjoying your retirement." "I'm not sure I'm ready to make such a big change." "But Mom, when will you be ready? The market is strong right now, but that could change. This might be the perfect time to sell." "Diana, I need time to process this information. It's overwhelming." "I understand, but Mom, you can't afford to wait too long to make a decision. Markets change. Opportunities disappear. We need to act while the conditions are favorable." After we hung up, I sat quietly in my kitchen, thinking about Diana's reaction to the appraisal. Her enthusiasm was genuine, but it was enthusiasm for what she saw as a solution to my problems, not consideration for what I might actually want. She was so focused on the financial benefits of selling that she'd barely acknowledged my emotional attachment to the house. Marcus called that afternoon with a similar level of excitement about the appraisal figures. "Mom, this is incredible news. I had no idea the house had appreciated so much." "Neither did I, honestly. This changes everything, doesn't it? I mean, you're sitting on a gold mine." "I suppose so, though it feels strange to think of my home as a gold mine." "But Mom, that's exactly what it is. And the beauty is, you can cash in that gold and still have a place to live. It's the perfect solution." "Marcus, it's not quite that simple. This is where I've lived for over 40 years. This is where your father died, where you and Diana grew up. It's not just a financial asset." "I understand that, Mom. But Dad's been gone for 5 years. And Diana and I are adults with our own homes. You're the only one still living in the past." His words stung, partly because there was truth in them and partly because of the dismissive way he treated my attachment to the house and the memories it contained. "I'm not living in the past, Marcus. I'm living in my home." "But Mom, is it really practical to maintain such a large house at your age? Wouldn't you be more comfortable somewhere smaller, somewhere with less responsibility?" "I'm comfortable. Here." "But what about the expenses? What about the maintenance? What about the isolation?" "What isolation?" "Mom, you're alone in that big house every day. Wouldn't you rather be somewhere with other people around, somewhere with activities and social opportunities?" The suggestion was clear. I should move to some kind of senior living facility, where my activities could be supervised and my social interactions managed. The idea of giving up my independence, my privacy, my connection to the life I'd built with Robert was anathema to me. "I have friends in this neighborhood, Marcus. I have a life here." "What kind of life? Talking to Mrs. Henderson over the fence? Playing bridge with a bunch of other elderly women? Mom, there's a whole world out there. and I'm free to explore that world from the comfort of my own home. Are you? Really? Because from what Diana and I have observed, you seem pretty isolated and worried about money most of the time. Observed. There was that word again, the clinical term for eavesdropping on my private conversations and making judgments about my mental state based on fragments of information taken out of context. I'm managing fine, Marcus. But you could be doing more than managing. You could be thriving. This appraisal gives you options you didn't have before. That evening, I prepared for my meeting with Harold by reviewing my actual financial situation. The portfolio statements showed a current value of $8.7 million, up from the $8.2 million I'd inherited 5 years ago. The income from investments alone was more than enough to support my current lifestyle indefinitely, with substantial amounts left over for emergencies, gifts, or charitable giving. But my children believed I was struggling to pay my bills, worried about maintaining my house, considering desperate measures like reverse mortgages to make ends meet. The disconnect between reality and their perception was so complete that I wondered if they'd ever really known me at all. The next day brought an unexpected visit from Diana, who arrived with a briefcase full of real estate listings and a barely contained excitement about the possibilities the appraisal had revealed. "Mom, I've been doing some research and I think I've found some properties that might interest you." She spread listings across my kitchen table, colorful brochures for condominiums and senior living communities that promised maintenance-free, living and active social environments. "Look at this one," she said, pointing to a sleek modern building downtown. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, balcony with a city view, and it's only $350,000. Only $350,000? Mom, compared to what your house is worth, that's a bargain. You'd have almost $300,000 left over to invest. What about this one? She indicated another listing, this one for a continuing care retirement community. This is perfect for someone in your situation. Independent living now, but with the option to move to assisted living or skilled nursing if you ever need it. Diana, these places look like institutions. They're not institutions, Mom. They're communities. Look at all the amenities. Fitness center, library, dining room, organized activities. You'd have so much more social interaction than you do now. I don't want more social interaction. I want my privacy. But Mom, isolation isn't healthy. At your age, you need to be around other people, engaged in activities, stimulated intellectually. Who says I'm not intellectually stimulated? I read constantly. I follow current events. I manage my own affairs. But wouldn't it be nice to have conversations with people your own age? To participate in book clubs or art classes or travel? Groups? The assumption underlying her suggestion was that my current life was somehow insufficient, that I needed external programming to make my existence meaningful. The idea that I might find fulfillment in quiet solitude, in my own thoughts and memories and chosen activities, seemed foreign to her. Diana, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not ready to move to a senior living facility. What about a regular condo then? Something smaller and more manageable but still independent? I'm not ready to move anywhere. Diana's frustration was becoming visible, her realtor's smile slipping slightly as she realized I wasn't as eager to embrace her vision as she'd hoped. Mom, I don't understand. You've been worried about money, about maintaining the house, about managing on a fixed income. This appraisal shows you have the resources to solve all those problems. Why wouldn't you want to take advantage of that? Because solving those problems would create new ones. I'd lose my home, my neighborhood, my independence. You wouldn't lose your independence. You'd gain financial security at the cost of everything else that makes my life worth living. Mom, that's not fair. These places I'm showing you are beautiful. You'd have a lovely home and financial peace of mind. I already have a lovely home, but you can't afford to keep it. The words hung in the air between us, and I saw Diana realize what she'd revealed. She'd admitted that her entire argument was based on the assumption that I couldn't afford my current lifestyle, an assumption that was completely false, but that she had no way of knowing was false. Diana, who says I can't afford to keep my house? You do, Mom. You've been talking about money troubles for weeks. You've been worried about expenses, considering changes to your investments, talking about refinancing. If you can afford to keep the house, why are you so concerned about money? It was a reasonable question, and one that I needed to answer carefully. My performance had been too convincing, creating a picture of financial distress that was driving my children to push for solutions I didn't want. I've been concerned about the future, Diana, about what might happen if I need expensive medical care, or if I become unable to manage my affairs. That's different from saying I can't afford my current lifestyle. But Mom, if you're sitting on $600,000 in home equity, those concerns don't make sense. You'd have more than enough to handle any emergency. Would I? Do you have any idea what long-term care costs these days? What a nursing home can charge? $600,000 sounds like a lot, but it might not last as long as you think. Diana leaned back in her chair, clearly frustrated by my response. So what's your plan, Mom? Stay in this house until you can't take care of yourself anymore, then hope you have enough money left to pay for care? I don't have a plan, Diana. I'm just trying to take things one day at a time. That's not enough anymore, Mom. You need to be more proactive about planning for your future. Whose future? Mine or yours? What's that supposed to mean? I mean, Diana, are you concerned about my future, or are you concerned about having to take care of me if I don't plan properly? Her face flushed, and I saw that my question had hit close to home. I'm concerned about both, Mom. I love you, and I want what's best for you, but I also have my own family to think about. I understand that, and I don't expect you to take care of me if I become unable to care for myself. But Mom, if you don't plan ahead, if you don't make smart financial decisions now, you might not have choices later. And if you run out of money, who do you think is going to have to help you? The threat was implicit but clear. Plan for your future according to our specifications, or we won't be able to help you when you need it. It was emotional blackmail disguised as concern, manipulation presented as love. Diana, I think you should go now. I need time to think about everything you've shown me. Mom, I'm trying to help you. I know, sweetheart. But this is a big decision, and I can't be rushed into it. After Diana left, I sat at my kitchen table looking at the real estate listings she'd scattered across the surface. Beautiful properties, all of them, but none of them were home. None of them contained the memories of a lifetime, the presence of a man I'd loved deeply, the comfort of familiar surroundings. But more than that, none of them represented choices I was making freely. They were all solutions to problems my children thought I had, answers to questions I wasn't asking. That night, I called Harold and confirmed our meeting for the following Wednesday. I'll have my son Marcus with me, as you suggested. Good, Judy. I think it will be helpful to have family input on these decisions. Harold, can I ask you something? Off the record? Of course. In your professional opinion, am I making rational financial decisions? There was a pause. Judy, the decisions you're proposing don't align with your financial situation or your stated goals. That concerns me. Do you think I'm experiencing some kind of cognitive decline? I think you're under stress about something, and that stress might be affecting your judgment. That's why I want your family involved in our discussion. After I hung up, I realized that Wednesday's meeting would be a turning point. Either my performance would convince Harold and Marcus that I was genuinely struggling and needed to make conservative financial changes, or the truth about my wealth would be revealed, and I'd have to find a new way to test my children's character. But as I prepared for bed that night, Looking at the monitor with its steadily blinking light, I realized that I'd already learned what I needed to know about Marcus and Diana. Their concern for my welfare was secondary to their concern for their own convenience and financial security. They wanted me to make decisions that would solve their problems, not necessarily decisions that would make me happy. The meeting with Harold would simply confirm what I already suspected. My children were more interested in managing my money than in understanding my wishes. And once I had that confirmation, I could decide what to do with the knowledge I'd gained through months of careful deception. Wednesday morning arrived with a bitter wind that rattled the windows and sent dead leaves skittering across my driveway. I dressed carefully for my meeting with Harold, choosing a navy wool dress that Robert had always said made me look distinguished. As I applied my lipstick in the bathroom mirror, I caught sight of my reflection and was surprised by how calm I appeared. Inside, my heart was racing with anticipation of what the day might reveal. Marcus arrived precisely at 9:30, his face bearing the expression of someone preparing to handle a difficult but necessary task. He kissed my cheek dutifully and helped me with my coat, his movements careful and deliberate as if I were made of fragile china. "How are you feeling about this meeting, Mom?" he asked as we drove toward Harold's office downtown. "Nervous, I suppose. These financial matters are so complicated." "Don't worry. Harold and I will make sure you understand all your options before any decisions are made." The phrase, "before any decisions are made," suggested that decisions would indeed be made, just not necessarily by me. I wondered if Marcus had already discussed my situation with Harold, if they'd formed some kind of alliance to manage my supposedly declining capacity to handle my own affairs. Harold's office was located in a glass tower that had been built during the real estate boom of the 90s. The lobby was all marble and brass, designed to convey stability and prosperity to clients who were trusting their life savings to the firms housed within its walls. We rode the elevator to the 15th floor in silence, Marcus checking his phone while I watched the numbers climb higher. Harold greeted us in his reception area, his smile warm but his eyes concerned as he looked at me. He was a distinguished man in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of subtle confidence that came from decades of managing other people's money successfully. "Judy, it's good to see you. And you must be Marcus. I've heard so much about you and your sister." We were ushered into Harold's private office, a space that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. The walls were lined with financial publications and family photographs, and his desk was arranged with the kind of meticulous organization that suggested attention to detail. "Now then," Harold said, settling behind his desk with a thick folder that I recognized as containing my portfolio information. "Judy has expressed some concerns about her investment strategy, and she felt it would be helpful to have family input on any changes." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his businessman's instincts engaged. "What kind of concerns?" Harold glanced at me, then back at Marcus. "Your mother wants to move her entire portfolio to extremely conservative investments. Certificates of deposit, treasury bonds, money market accounts. Investments that would significantly reduce her annual income." "Why would that be a problem?" Marcus asked. "Conservative investments are safer, aren't they?" "Generally speaking, yes. But in your mother's case, the trade-off between safety and income doesn't make financial sense." Harold opened the folder and pulled out a summary sheet. "Let me show you what we're discussing." I watched Marcus's face as Harold spread the documents across his desk. The first sheet showed my current portfolio allocation, with investments spread across various asset classes in a pattern that was actually quite conservative for someone of my net worth. The second sheet showed the proposed changes I'd been requesting, with everything moved to ultra-safe, low-yield options. But it was the third sheet that made Marcus's face change completely. It was my most recent portfolio statement, showing a total value of $8.7 million. $8.7 million? Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes," Harold said. "Your mother is quite well off, which is why her desire to move to such conservative investments is puzzling to me." Marcus stared at the number, his mouth slightly open. Mom, I had no idea. We thought you were struggling financially. I looked at him with what I hoped was confusion. Struggling? Marcus, why would you think that? Because you've been talking about money. Troubles for weeks. Worrying about expenses, considering refinancing the house, complaining about bills. Harold frowned. Judy, with an annual income of approximately $400,000 from your investments alone, plus Social Security and your pension, you have no reason to worry about ordinary expenses. $400,000? Marcus turned to look at me. Mom, that's more than I make at my job. The revelation was having exactly the effect I'd hoped for. Marcus was realizing that everything he'd assumed about my financial situation was wrong, that all his concerns about my ability to maintain my independence were based on completely false premises. I suppose I do have adequate resources, I said carefully. But at my age, I worry about the future, about healthcare costs, about long-term care, about leaving something for you and Diana. Harold leaned back in his chair. Judy, even with the most expensive long-term care scenarios, your current assets would last for decades, and your children would still inherit substantial amounts. How substantial? Marcus asked, his voice tight. Well, that would depend on how long your mother lives and what her care needs are. But conservatively speaking, several $1,000,000 each. I watched Marcus process this information, saw the calculations running behind his eyes. Several $1,000,000 each. Money that would solve all his financial problems, pay for his children's college educations, fund a comfortable retirement he'd probably never expected to afford. Mom, he said slowly, if you have this much money, why have you been so worried? About finances? It was the crucial question, the one that would determine whether my deception continued or whether I revealed the truth about what I'd been doing for the past few months. Because I didn't want you and Diana to know, I said, quietly. Didn't want us to know what? About the money, about how much your father left me. Harold looked puzzled. Judy, why wouldn't you want your children to know about your financial security? Because I wanted to see how they'd treat me if they thought I was poor. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language, while Harold looked back and forth between us, clearly trying to understand what was happening. What do you mean? Marcus asked finally. I mean, Marcus, that for the past few months, I've been pretending to have financial problems to see how you and your sister would react. Pretending? Every worried conversation about money, every mention of struggling with expenses, every concern about maintaining the house, it was all an act. Marcus's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, realization, and finally, anger. You've been lying to us? I've been testing you. Testing us for what? To see if your concern for my welfare was genuine, or if it was motivated by other factors. Harold cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps I should step out and let you two discuss this privately. No, I said firmly. Please stay, Harold. I want a witness to this conversation. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Mom, this is insane. You deliberately deceived us, made us worry about you, made us think you were in trouble, all for some kind of twisted test. A test that you failed, Marcus. Failed? How did we fail? We tried to help you. You tried to control me. You installed that monitoring device in my bedroom. You pressured me to sell my house. You made plans for my future without consulting my wishes. You weren't trying to help me. You were trying to manage me. The monitor was for your safety. The monitor was for your peace of mind. And it became a tool for surveillance, for eavesdropping on my private conversations and making judgments about my mental state. Marcus sat back down heavily, his face pale. You knew we were listening? Of course I knew. And I used that knowledge to feed you exactly the information I wanted you to have. But why? Why would you do something so cruel? The accusation stung, but I pressed on. Because I needed to know who you really were, Marcus. I needed to understand whether your love for me was conditional on my dependence, whether your concern was genuine or motivated by self-interest. And what did you conclude? I concluded that you and Diana see me as a burden to be managed rather than a person to be respected. You want me to make decisions that are convenient for you, not decisions that make me happy. Harold was taking notes, probably for his own protection in case this family drama somehow reflected back on his professional responsibilities. Judy, I have to ask, are you planning to make the investment changes you discussed, or was that part of your test as well? Those changes were never real, Harold. My current investment strategy is perfectly adequate for my needs. Marcus turned to Harold. So this whole meeting was unnecessary? It appears so, Harold said carefully, though I'm relieved to know that Judy isn't actually planning to make financially disadvantageous decisions. But I am planning to make one significant change, I said, pulling a manila envelope from my purse. I'm changing my will. Both men stared at me as I placed the envelope on Harold's desk. I had my attorney draw up a new will last week. Harold, you're named as executor if you're willing to serve. Judy, what kind of changes are we talking about? I'm disinheriting Marcus and Diana. Marcus shot to his feet again. You're what? I'm leaving my entire estate to Sophia Morales, my home health aide. Sophia, Mom, you barely know her. I know her better than I apparently know my own children, Marcus. Sophia has been coming to my house twice a week for the past year, helping with household tasks I'm no longer able to manage easily. She's kind, respectful, and genuinely concerned about my welfare. But she's not family. Neither are you, apparently, not in any way that matters. Harold looked deeply uncomfortable. Judy, are you certain about this decision? Disinheriting your children is a significant step. I'm completely certain. Sophia treats me like a person worthy of respect and dignity. You and Diana treat me like a problem to be solved. Marcus's face was red with anger and what might have been panic. Mom, this is crazy. You're talking about millions of dollars. You can't just give it all to some stranger. Sophia isn't a stranger. She's the person who listens when I talk about missing your father, who asks about my health because she cares about the answer, who treats my home with respect because she understands it's important to me. But we care about you too. Do you? Because your actions suggest otherwise. You've spent months plotting to get me out of my house, planning to put me in some kind of facility where my activities could be supervised and my independence eliminated. We were trying to ensure your safety. You were trying to ensure your convenience. There's a difference, Marcus. Harold was writing furiously, probably documenting everything for legal purposes. Judy, I have to ask whether you've discussed this decision with your attorney. Extensively. The new will is legally binding and properly witnessed. Sophia doesn't know about it yet, but she'll be contacted after my death. Mom, please. Marcus's voice had taken on a pleading tone. Don't do this. We can work things out. We can do better. Can you? Marcus, can you honestly tell me that your concern for my welfare isn't influenced by your expectations about your inheritance? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, apparently unable to formulate an answer that wouldn't be obviously false. I thought not, I said. The truth is, Marcus, you and Diana have been planning my future based on what would be easiest for you, not what would make me happiest. You want me to sell my house so you won't have to worry about my living alone. You want me to move to a facility so you won't have to check on me regularly. You want to manage my money so you won't have to wonder if I'm making sound decisions. Those are reasonable concerns. They would be if they were motivated by love instead of convenience. Harold set down his pen and looked at me seriously. Judy, I have to ask whether you're making this decision while you're angry, or whether you've thought it through carefully. I've thought about little else for weeks, Harold. The monitoring device my children installed gave me a unique opportunity to observe their true character, and I didn't like what I saw. What if they change? What if they acknowledge their mistakes and commit to treating you differently? Then they'll have learned a valuable lesson about respect and dignity. But the inheritance decision stands. Marcus was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of shock, anger, and what might have been genuine grief. Mom, you're destroying our family. I'm not destroying anything, Marcus. I'm simply responding to what our family has become. Which is what? A relationship based on obligation and expectation rather than love and respect. You and Diana don't visit me because you enjoy my company. You visit me because you feel obligated to check on your elderly mother. You don't call because you want to hear my voice. You call because you think you should. That's not true. Isn't it? Marcus, when was the last time you asked me about something other than my health, my safety, or my finances? When was the last time you told me about your life, your hopes, your concerns? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about managing my old age? He was silent, and I could see him searching his memory for examples that would contradict my assertion. The fact that he had to search told me everything I needed to know. The saddest part, I continued, is that your father would be heartbroken by what you've become. Robert raised you to be honorable, caring people. He would be devastated to see how you've treated your mother's independence and dignity. Don't bring Dad into this. Robert is already in this, Marcus. Every decision I make, every day I live, is influenced by the love he showed me and the values he taught our children. Values that you seem to have forgotten. Harold was looking increasingly uncomfortable with the personal nature of our conversation. Perhaps we should adjourn this meeting and allow everyone to process what's been discussed. That's probably wise, I agreed, standing up and gathering my purse. Harold, thank you for your time and your patience. I'll continue to work with you on managing my investments, and I hope you'll agree to serve as executor of my estate. I'll need to review the will documents, but yes, I'll consider it. Marcus stood as well, his movements mechanical. Mom, please don't make any final decisions while you're upset. Think about what you're doing. I have thought about it, Marcus. I've thought about little else for months. But cutting us out completely? That's so extreme. Is it more extreme than installing surveillance equipment in my bedroom? Is it more extreme than pressuring me to abandon my home? Is it more extreme than treating me like I'm incapable of making my own decisions? We rode the elevator down in silence, the tension between us almost palpable. In the lobby, Marcus finally spoke. Mom, what do we have to do to fix this? I don't know if it can be fixed, Marcus. The damage might be too severe. But you're willing to give millions of dollars to someone who's essentially a stranger rather than to your own children. Sophia isn't a stranger. She's the person who's shown me the most genuine kindness and respect over the past year. She deserves to be rewarded for that. And we deserve to be punished? You deserve to understand the consequences of your choices. We drove home in silence, Marcus's hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he processed what he'd learned. When we reached my house, he walked me to the door but didn't come inside. Mom, I'm going to call Diana. We need to talk about this as a family. That's fine, Marcus, but understand that my decision is final. We'll see about that. The threat was subtle, but clear. They weren't going to accept my decision passively. They would fight the will, challenge my mental competency, do whatever was necessary to protect their inheritance. But I was prepared for that battle. The months of careful documentation, the recordings from their own monitoring device, the testimony of professionals like Harold who could attest to my mental acuity. All of it would support my right to dispose of my property, as I saw fit. That evening, Diana arrived within an hour of Marcus's call. I could hear them talking in hushed, urgent tones on my front porch before they rang the doorbell. When I opened the door, both of their faces were carefully composed, but I could see the strain around their eyes. "Mom, we need to talk," Diana said. "Of course. Come in." We sat in my living room, the same room where I'd raised them, where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays, where Robert had taught them to play chess and help with homework. The irony of having this conversation in a place filled with happy family memories wasn't lost on me. "Mom," Diana began, "Marcus told me about your meeting with Harold, about your test. What did you think of it?" "I think it was manipulative and cruel." "Do you? Because I thought installing a monitoring device in my bedroom without my genuine consent was manipulative and cruel. We were trying to protect you. You were trying to control me. There's a difference, Diana." Marcus leaned forward. "Mom, we made mistakes. We admit that. But cutting us out of your will completely? That's not proportional to what we did wrong. What you did wrong was treat me like I was incompetent, like I was a burden, like I was a problem to be managed, rather than a person to be respected. We never thought of you as a burden. Didn't you? Diana, you've been pushing me to sell my house for months. You've brought me real estate listings for senior living facilities. You've made it clear that you think my current lifestyle is unsustainable and that I need to make changes to accommodate your convenience. That's not how we meant it. How you meant it doesn't matter, Diana. How you acted is what matters. And your actions showed me that you see me as an obligation rather than a beloved parent." They exchanged glances, and I could see them trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. "Mom," Marcus said carefully, "what would it take for you to reconsider your decision?" "I don't know if anything could convince me to change my mind at this point. But hypothetically, if we acknowledged our mistakes, if we committed to treating you differently, if we showed you the respect you deserve, would that make a difference?" "Perhaps, but I'd need to see genuine change, not just promises made to protect your inheritance." "How would we prove that our change was genuine?" "Time, Marcus. Consistent behavior over time. But I'm not sure I have enough time left to adequately test your sincerity." Diana was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, we love you. We really do. We just wanted to make sure you were safe and taken care of. I know you love me, Diana. But love without respect isn't enough. Love that comes with conditions and expectations isn't the kind of love I want to leave behind. So you're going to leave everything to Sophia instead?" "Sophia has shown me unconditional kindness and respect. She's earned the right to benefit from my gratitude. But she's not family. Family is more than shared DNA, Diana. Family is about how people treat each other, how they support each other, how they respect each other's autonomy and dignity." They stayed for another hour, pleading, arguing, trying to convince me to reconsider. But I'd made my decision based on months of careful observation, and nothing they said could erase what I'd learned about their true motivations. After they left, I sat in my bedroom looking at the monitor on my nightstand. Tomorrow, I would ask them to remove it. The test was over, and I'd learned everything I needed to know. I picked up Robert's photograph and held it gently. "Well, my love, our children have shown their true colors. I hope I've made the right decision." Outside, the wind continued to rattle the windows, but inside my bedroom, there was only peace and the quiet satisfaction of a woman who'd finally learned the truth about the people she'd trusted most. The monitor's green light blinked steadily, but for the first time in months, I didn't care who might be listening. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.